Have you guys listened or watched the Ryan Day Pate State Speaker Series episode? Some are saying it's our best one we've done so far. Many more are saying it's as open and as just straight fist to the chest honest as they've heard Ryan Day. I can't disagree, and even if I did, I wouldn't disagree because I want you to watch it. It's really good, though. It's up on the channel right now. We are jam-packed. We are high top of thriving. Yeah, I wrote that. Thriving downtown Nashville, Tennessee on this Thursday, May 1st, the year of our Lord 2025. Always brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. I'm hesitant. You hear the hesitation in my voice, Colin and Jesse. It's because I don't believe in a couple of things that we're going to do on the show tonight. I don't believe in spoilers. I think it's in very poor taste, but I regret to inform you, we know who's going to win the national championship this year. And so journalistically, it's the first time I've ever called myself a journalist, but journalistically, don't I have to share that? Don't I owe it to you to share that information that we have come across? And the thing about it is, it's not even my opinion, it's science. And as we all know, you cannot refute science, and we've got it. We've got it right here. The science is on this piece of paper. So I will deliver those results momentarily. Now, if you don't want to have the ending spoiled for you, I get it. I get it. But it may be time to turn the show off tonight. So I'm going to do that. And I also don't believe in talking about Bill Belichick's personal life whatsoever, but it's not my show. So unfortunately for me, I put it to a vote today. And we didn't get a supermajority, but almost a supermajority of you said, yes, I will not give you what you want on this front. I promise you immunity. So I've got that. I've got a metric ton of post-spring observations. I was at Bama yesterday. One of you asked about the behind-the-scenes stuff. It involves the Secret Service. Yet again, a run-in with the Secret Service. It's become an old hat around here. One of those stories, notably, I have never told, nor can I tell on the air, but I'll tell this one. It was lighthearted and it was fun yesterday. So I got all that and more. Oh, by the way, can you buy a national championship? Open question for everyone. Can you buy one? We'll talk about that tonight. They're watching us in Shoreview, Minnesota, Pickens, South Carolina, Tampa, Florida, Mystic, Connecticut. Thank you so much. Yeah, Pate State Speaker Series. Where were we? We were in Morgantown, West Virginia on Monday, Columbus, Ohio Tuesday, Tuscaloosa Wednesday. We're here in Nashville on Thursday. As far as I know, we're not going anywhere tomorrow. As far as I know, we'll see. It's probably going to rain us out in softball again because it does it every Friday in Nashville this time of year. So who knows what tomorrow holds. But in the meantime, borderline breaking news, easily worth a paper pop. I got good news for you. I've got bad news. Nay, Colin, here's a better endpoint. I've got great news for you, but I've got terrible news for you. And they're both the same thing. We know who's going to win the national championship this upcoming year. That's great news if you want to save yourself the time or maybe win some money betting on it at FanDuel. It's terrible news if you don't like spoilers, though, because this is as big as it gets in the spoiler category when it comes to college football. It is May 1st. We're not going to crown a national champ until, like January 19th of 2026? It's hard to even see that far on the horizon, but yet we already know who's going to win it. So here are a couple of things you need to know. How did we come about this information, first and foremost? Well, here's what you need to know. You can't argue with science. And so if this were merely my opinion, I'd probably keep it to myself. And if it were just my opinion, you shouldn't care about it. But we have science on our side here. Did you know that 5 of the last 6 national champions had the most first-round draft picks in the subsequent draft? Ohio State, for instance, just won the national championship this past January, and they had first-round picks galore and draft picks galore this last cycle. 7 of the last 8 national champs had the most players taken in the subsequent draft period. And there you go. Ohio State just won it. Ohio State had the most draft picks. Like I said, science. Can't argue with it. Colin wouldn't put the graphic up if you could. You can't argue with this. So this is science. Well, you might think to yourself, all right, so if I'm going to take it to mean that the upcoming national champ is going to have the most players drafted in the draft, it's all well and good. But here's the problem. The draft is like 11 and a half months away, isn't it? And the answer is yes, but we don't have to wait. You know what we have at our disposal, courtesy of CBS or Fox Sports or ESPN or The Athletic or PFF? Mock drafts, which, as we all know, are as settled as science can possibly get. And so what we did, just to give you an idea where our heads were at this time last year, is we went out there in the mock draft community and we aggregated it all. Now, these are mock drafts. It's not what ended up happening in the draft, but we used mock drafts because that's all we had at our disposal at the time. Now, the mock draft sort of community this time last year indicated that Michigan would have the most first-rounders. The mock drafts averaged Michigan having 3.75 first-round draft picks. Here's what actually happened. Not quite. Will Johnson got hurt. Michigan kind of would have still maybe led this thing. It's just that they didn't have a quarterback on last year's team. But if you'll notice, Ohio State was right there at 2. That's your national champ. You got Georgia, a playoff team. You got Texas, a playoff team. So the mock draft community was sort of kind of on point. They threw the dart, and the dart hit the board. They just didn't hit the bullseye. We assume they've learned, right? They've learned their lesson, and so we are going to assume that these mock drafts are gospel now. And so we're going to take our internal formulas here, and we're going to provide it a little more clarity via the mock drafts. And I have the fortunate/unfortunate task of informing you that we've arrived at a conclusion, like 9 or 8 months earlier, something like that. The upcoming national champion will be the Clemson Tigers. Can you believe that? Good for Dabo Swinney. There will be no little old Clemson. There will be no doubting. There will be no hating. There will be no looking down on Clemson. None of that. If they're planning on bottling that up at any point this year, I want to get out ahead of it and tell you no, no, no. Clemson is supposed to win the national championship this upcoming year. Whomst amongst us knew, right? So the science is not going to fail us here. According to the mock draft community, Clemson, we aggregated all of them. Jordan Reed over at ESPN, a late addition. I did not appreciate him waiting until today to put his out. And he listens to the show, so you know to do better next year. But with that addition, Clemson 3.2 on average, first rounders for the upcoming NFL draft. So this is it, guys. This is it. I assume they're going to win the ACC. They've got pretty good odds. They're the favorite to win the ACC. They're not one of the top 4 favorites to win the national championship right now in the odds market at FanDuel. In fact, they're not 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th. Actually, they're tied with Bama for the 7th best odds. Now, to show you how much I believe in the scientific method of mock drafting as it relates to projecting the draft, which will then reveal the future national champ, there should be an acronym for that, I think. I have already wagered on this. I don't want to tell you how much. That would be unethical, of course. But I have already wagered on this, and it's almost unfair. You know, I almost feel like maybe FanDuel should take that down off the board and recalibrate the odds now that this breaking news has been provided. But you know what I noticed there? I noticed Texas is up there again. I noticed Penn State's up there. Yeah, Oregon's up there. Ohio State's up there. You could look at that one of two ways. You could look at that as, ooh, look at the SEC, well represented again. Yeah, but if you also looked at the mock draft, if you looked at the little aggregation we did, Texas is the only SEC team in the top 5. Now, there were a few there, 6, 7, 8, 9. But here's what I noticed. Did you notice who wasn't there? Clemson's there, Texas, Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, Bama, LSU, Miami. Where in the world is Georgia? Well, the answer is they're not there because they just sent a ton of kids to the draft. Does that mean for certain that they won't have big-time first-round caliber talent emerge on this team this year? No, it doesn't. It just means it's not very clear right now. But it's funny when you think about Georgia last year, it's really weird, actually, because they didn't run the ball very well. They didn't play as good a defense as they normally do. By all accounts, it felt like a down year. They won the SEC anyway, had a first-round bye, then they went and lost to Notre Dame. But anyway, if it feels like a down year, history has come to teach you at a place like Georgia, you can expect a bounce back. A down year, relatively speaking, for them just means a big-time year the following year. Well, if that happens, then they're going to have to disprove science to do it. Okay? And what kind of academic institution is ready to fly in the face of science around here? So USC's not there either. So it's not Georgia as the lone major brand, although Georgia's been a mainstay in this conversation. USC wasn't there. All the other usual suspects would be there. You're not going to have a Big 12 in there. You're not going to have a G5 in there. Of course, those teams will make the playoff, but we're talking about winning it all. So the Clemson Tigers are going to win the national championship this year. I'm just pausing because I'm ready to hear the arguments. Again, I don't have to defend this because this is not my opinion. This is science. So if it comes to pass this will be an iconic segment. And if it doesn't come to pass, as I've told you many times, and I'll tell you once more, I just want the credit. I don't want the blame. Who wants blame? Blame is lame. And it's the reason they rhyme. So it's on the science. It's not on me. There's a difference between science and what we understand about it. So maybe the mock draft community got it wrong, but not me. All I'm asking you, if you remember anything about the show, is don't blame me. Academy Sports and Outdoors is your home, not for mock drafts yet, but for Jordan Brand. Many of you have started to take up Academy on their offer here. I feel the need to remind you, here's what's on the line. Many of you are going and buying Jordan there anyway. So if you buy more than $50 of Jordan Brand, and judging you by your actions, you are, just get money out of it. Here's all you need to do. You need to snap a picture of that receipt. You need to post it on your socials. The hashtag is AcademyXJordan. Jordan with an A on the back half, not two O's. That's a different kind of Jordan that's been floating around out there. No. Jordan, AcademyXJordan. And you need to tag me, Josh Pate CFP, and you need to tag Academy, because they're just throwing gift cards out left and right now. So you might as well get some money back. I know you're making the purchases, plural of purchase. Anyway, you might as well get some money out of it. But whomst amongst us new? Academy and Jordan, Jordan, Jordan. I cannot believe we're in a place in life where we have to specify the spelling, but we do. Let's move merrily along here. We got a lot to get to on the show tonight. I'm happy to have all of you in. Well-traveled this week, very well-traveled. So we had a question about an article that's been circulating. Preston out of Denver asked, what do you make of the report that Texas is going to spend up to $40 million on their 2025 roster? We all thought Ohio State's $21 million was a lot, but this seems utterly ridiculous. Well, Preston, I know there's been some pushback on the exact number there. Here's what you need to know. From a broad strokes perspective, Texas is going to spend a ton of money on this year's roster. Is it ridiculous? Well, of course it is. Spending that kind of money on a college football roster is ridiculous. Yes. Do I blame Texas? Of course not. And I would do the same thing if I were them, because that's the spot that the sport is in for this upcoming year. Keep in mind, the entire reason that this would even happen is not because Texas has decided to spend that kind of money every year. It's quite the opposite. Texas and many other programs out there realized if these rules are actually about to change, then the last time we can just go free spend as much as we want is right now. So let's go dump all of our cash in this barrel here. Not all of it, but you get what I'm saying. Let's disproportionately load up on 2025. Texas Tech just did something very similar. And let's see what we can do. You'll notice that there's been a lot of pushback on this. I saw it. I was traveling all week, but I saw it. And I saw Texas fans defending it, and I saw every other fan base calling it out. The broad strokes, like the principle of the matter is, yes, it's ridiculous that it can happen. No, I don't think it's ridiculous Texas is doing it. Every single one of you would do it if you could. Texas just can. I've told you for a while, there's Texas, and then there's a gap, and then there's everybody else when it comes to the game of NIL. And it's not just the amount of money they're spending, it's how they structure it. They are very, very methodical, borderline scientific about how they do it. So it's not surprising. However, the follow-up that I've seen from a lot of non-Texas folks out there is, well, it won't matter. They'll figure out a way to choke it away, or they'll just pay to win a national championship, and that's not worth anything, or that doesn't really stand up against the tradition of college football and how you're supposed to do it. Whatever. I don't really think anyone in Texas cares what outsiders think, but you're free to have that opinion. But the broader question here is it really that easy? Can you just go buy a national championship? At that point, knowing my audience like I do, some of you are listening right now or watching right now saying, Ohio State just did it. Okay, I'll hear you out on that. What do you mean Ohio State did it? If that is what you're thinking. What do you mean Ohio State did it? Do you mean that they paid their roster a lot of money? Because that's undeniable. Of course they paid their roster a lot of money. Is that buying a championship? Now, let me tell you what I think of when you tell me someone bought a championship. I think they went and purchased a lot of assets, players in this case, that were not otherwise going to be on their roster, and those assets won them a championship. Is that what you think Ohio State did? Is that how you define it? Or do we define it differently? So the reason I ask that is because I'm not so much concerned about how much Texas is spending this year, because someone's going to do it. Might as well be Texas. What I care about is, no matter how much money you spend, what's the formula to win a championship? Is that the formula? Just dump a whole bunch of money out there? That's how you win a championship. So I was in Columbus, Ohio a couple of days ago to do a conversation with Ryan Day that we released this morning, and it's on the channel right now. And you can go watch the whole thing on the channel, but I had Jesse and Colin clip a part of it because I asked Ryan Day about it and about, in his opinion, a lot of the misnomers out there about how last year's team got put together. Why did last year's team win? Because there's a healthy chunk of the college football public that thinks, oh man, $21 million, anyone could win. I'll talk about it more on the other side. Here's what Ryan Day had to say.
It's just easy for people to say, well, you know, Ohio State had NIL for this amount of money or whatever that is, and it's just so cheap and so easy for someone to say. If you actually do the research, and all it does is really tell you the value of an Ohio State football player. I mean, when you look at a brand that has, you know, just south of 12 million fans in the city of Columbus with 2 million people, and the power of Ohio State, yeah, our guys are going to make a lot of money in NIL. And the truth is, the majority of those guys were all guys that decided to come back, who were already on the team that we've recruited and developed. We did add 6 or 7 guys, but not 15, not 20, where we went out there and just went and got the best players in college football. That wasn't the case. And that's not what won us a championship. I think it's just easy for people just to kind of say that, and just because it's easy and it's cheap.
Ohio State added guys from the portal that were instrumental pieces in winning the national championship. Their starting quarterback was from the portal. Caleb Downs was from the portal. Quinshon Judkins went early second round in the portal. All that stuff's true, but what he's saying is also true. That's not what won them the championship. If you watched them last year, I don't even care if you were like around the program or had any access. If you just watched Ohio State closely, did you feel the vibe emanating off that team? After they lost a couple of games, after that Michigan game, that should have just ripped your heart out. I promise you, if a team is put together and the adhesive that's holding it together is money, it fractures. As soon as that Michigan loss happens, it fractures. So what Ryan Day's saying, which bleeds back into the theme of this year, is it's not money that went out and won us a championship. We paid a lot of guys to stay here, but that's because they were the ones that we went and recruited out of high school and developed. And then there's a lot of connectivity, synergy, and we call that a team, by the way. A lot of those team elements, we wanted to pay to keep that together. Absolutely we did. So then look at Texas. I don't care who they're paying. Are the guys they're paying the kind of guys that, along with their individual skill sets, bring that kind of adhesive collectively? That you can't know. I don't even know if Sark could know that, although he's a lot better equipped to know it than you and I are. But can you buy a championship? Well, if you could pay for that, which is an intangible in nature, then yeah, just like when we had Kirby on the show last month, and he said, you know, paying a football player is one thing. If you could ever bottle up fire, passion, energy, synergy, those things, there's no amount of money that I wouldn't spend on, because those are the guarantees. If you have those are the ones, those are the elements that lead to a lot more guarantees. I know if you hate Ohio State, it's really easy. Or if you hate Texas, it's really easy to dismiss any accomplishment as, well, it's bought and paid for. By the way, that's not NIL. That's been the case since the beginning of time. If you're 17 years old and you're watching the show, and so you're late high school or you're into college now, and you've watched this sport for a few years as an adult, you may think this is some radically new concept. If you're college age, of anytime someone wins, they're just going to be accused of having bought a national championship. This has happened since the advent of color TV, of the thing that's next to me in this double box. It's just that back in the day, it was illegal to do. So it was a more legit arrow to throw at somebody. Well, yeah, but that team was bought and paid for under the table. Well, now you're kind of allowed to do it, and then we can get into the whole argument about how NIL was intended to be used versus how it is used. There's no cop. The NCAA's tires are flat. Their lights and sirens don't even work. No one cares. No one cares. So if it's not going to be enforced, and if everyone candidly is really doing it anyway, you can have a problem with the principle of it, which I don't love the principle of it, but here's what I know. Just like the New York Yankees in baseball, my entire childhood, they had much more money to spend than anyone else in the league. You know what they still had to do as a team? They still had to beat other teams. I mean, I watched the Marlins beat them one year. And at the time, the Florida Marlins, what did they have financially that the Yankees had? Nothing. But what they did have, well, they had starting pitchers that no one knew the names of until the World Series. A kid named Miguel Cabrera, I think, was also on that team. They had a team. They had a team. They had the elements that make up a team. And those aren't individual pieces. Big difference in individual pieces in a team. You know more than anyone else, me included, knows whether Texas is going to have that this year. So I don't know that they've bought anything other than the opportunity to compete. They're watching us in Chandler, Arizona, Tifton, Georgia, and for the first time ever, we have someone checking in from Presque Isle, Maine. And I think maybe most of you do not believe that I know where Presque Isle, Maine is, but I do. Have never been there. Have never been to the state of Maine. And I don't know that the speaker series is going to take us up there this year, but I knew someone from Presque Isle. Shout out, Jenna. I knew someone from Presque Isle. All right, let's move on. Got a ton happening. Now that spring ball is done, we just have this collection. We have a big file of people asking about individual teams, like what's the biggest question or concern or strength or whatever coming out of spring ball. So we're going to start. I'm going to do this like really, really, really quick because I want to get a lot of teams in here. I'm just going to go through some teams. Tonight we're going to do the SEC. We're going to go through a bunch of teams, less than a minute on each one of them, some thoughts, some biggest questions or concerns, strengths, and we'll just see how this ages. I think it'll age pretty well. There's not much that's going to happen between now and August. So, Texas, I guess one of my biggest questions with them would be, well, you lose 12 to the NFL, and I'm looking at quarterback, and it's new, and you got 4 offensive linemen. Your D-line, again, you had to rebuild the interior of. Wide receiver, there's a lot you have to backfill there for the second straight year. Ton of talent. But they start at Ohio State in week 1. Is it all gelled together? The edge room, the running back room, excellent there. But just what's fascinating is they didn't really go out and portal much on the offensive line. They've trusted their recruiting. They trust their development there. And you got Arch Manning, new starter at quarterback. If they're right and if they can afford to trust that, then Texas can go win a national championship this year. Next up, maybe, I don't want to say, do I want to label them this yet? I don't want to label them this yet. You know what? Save the labels. It's only May. Save the labels. Georgia just sent 13 guys to the NFL draft. They couldn't run the ball last year. So that's the identity. That's not like a non-starter. If you tell me Georgia can't run the ball, I don't really think Georgia can do a whole heck of a lot in the national championship picture. So is that back? They went and got the kid out of Illinois in the portal. Is the ability to control the game running the ball back? They had their worst rush output this millennium last year. I love the addition at the edge position, but just getting their identity back. They weren't all that great defensively last year either. Running the ball, playing solid defense. I just expect that with Georgia. So can I expect that this upcoming year? I don't know. They open against Marshall, so it's not like opening against Clemson last year. But that schedule ramps up pretty quick. They play Tennessee and Alabama in their first 4 games. Speaking of the latter, Alabama, a lot's going to be made of the quarterback position with good reason. I think that'll be Ty Simpson's job. How good is Ty Simpson? We'll see. They added Ryan Grubb at offensive coordinator, and I would love to know whether he'll be able to have a run game they can depend on. Because last year, it wasn't really there for them, which was a mild surprise to me. I think you could possibly make the argument maybe they didn't give it enough time in some games to like lather up and be able to be leaned on. But the past is past. You didn't really add huge personnel additions from the portal at all to the tailback room. So are those guys able to get it done? Is that offensive line able to get it done? They had 84 rush yards per game from the running back position in conference play last year, which is completely unacceptable. So the other thing is there's no premier pass rusher on that team, but I think there are a lot of solid B options, and if 1 or 2 of them elevate to A- caliber, This could be a really good pass rush, but that remains to be seen. LSU, I hear the noise. There's some people in this building that like LSU a lot. LSU needs to be balanced enough offensively. They were 7th throwing the ball and 107th rushing the ball last year. And you know our age-old philosophy around here on balance. It's not necessarily seen on the stat sheet. It's seen on, 3rd and 4 or 5. And does that defensive coordinator truly believe you're willing to run the ball or throw the ball on that down? If he believes that, you have achieved balance, no matter what the stat sheet says. They didn't have that last year. Will they have that this year? Also, am I going to see that portal class on defense really help to springboard the overall production? Because Blake Baker's a great defensive coordinator, and he did as much as he could last year. He may have done more than he should have been able to do last year, but this year, that's really when you should start to see more sustainable, like year-over-year sustainable type improvement defensively. They got Clemson, Florida, and Ole Miss in their first 5 games. So whatever's going to come together needs to come together quick. They don't have a backloaded schedule. Ole Miss, there's no way they're going to be number 2 in scoring defense again. There's no way. It's going to drop off. The question, at least somewhat, is how much does it drop off? 4 of their 5 in the secondary, I would imagine, will be transfers. And so you got that to look at. But then also what's going to dominate the conversation is Austin Simmons at quarterback. You just had Jackson Dart go in the draft. So Austin Simmons, everybody at Ole Miss is in love with his potential. Age-old adage, though, like practice is one thing, games are another thing. They've got as good a setup schedule-wise as you could hope for breaking in a new quarterback. They got 2 conference games in the first 3 weeks, but it's Kentucky and Arkansas. Those aren't guaranteed wins. We learned that last year, specifically about Kentucky. But Ole Miss, big question, scoring D, and then also quarterback. I move on. Texas A&M, big mystery team, I would say. Texas A&M, defensively last year, 90th against the pass. They were 69th in sacks per game. And that was an area you thought may be a strength for them. They didn't have it. They didn't have the kind of juice that I thought they would. Now they lose some guys there. And outside of Cassius Howell and Terry and York, I'm not sure that there are a ton of, I guess, guys I feel comfortable just blindly depending on in their defensive front. That could change. It's college football. It happens every year. But that's one area I'm looking at. And then the other one is Marcel Reed at quarterback just needs to elevate his game. Now, luckily for him, I do think he's got the pass catchers around him to do that. I think he's got a good tailback room. So they're not looking at him. At no point will anyone at A&M say, it's on you to carry us. No, it's on him to do his job. And then if he does, and he elevates his level of play, intermediate, underneath pass game included, then A&M should be okay. They should be a contender there. We move along. See, we're trying to keep a pace. It feels kind of awkward because normally we're a little more long-winded on this, but we got to fit a bunch of teams in here. South Carolina really didn't add anything at South Carolina, I want to restate that. South Carolina didn't really add anything at wide receiver in the portal, and I very much expected them to because it's an area of big need for them, and I just wonder, with the guys they have in-house there, can they help Sellers enough? Lenore Sellers, quarterback. You know, he's the kind of guy who you're looking at, face of that team. You're going to expect him to take a big leap this year, but is that cast of talent around him to help that happen? They did not have a wide receiver over 400 yards last year. They lost 4 offensive linemen to the draft as well. Like, South Carolina was sneaky loaded last year, and now this year, we'll see. Again, it's college football. So there are always unknown commodities in spring, summer, fall that end up coming on the scene big time and even surprising the local fan base. I'm just saying it's got to happen for South Carolina this year. What about health at Florida? Health. We always want a healthy team. DJ Lagway's health is by 10 miles the biggest focal point around Florida, but everyone's been talking about that. If DJ Lagway is healthy at quarterback, this is one of the teams in the country that truly does have top 10 offensive and defensive potential. You know, if they maximize their capability, it's the kind of team that could do both, which means it's the kind of team that would be a playoff caliber team except for the small pesky detail that that's their schedule there. They face 7 of the top 14 teams in the college football playoff odds. But you know what? If they really are, even if they're top 15 caliber, offensively and defensively, at the same time, Florida's got what it takes to win every one of those games. Not go undefeated, but I mean compete in and win any of those games. So you got Florida going 10-2. They're a lock to make the playoff. A 9-3 Florida should be in the playoff, and I just say that not even knowing what the rest of the field looks like. But anyone who goes 9-3 against that schedule should be a playoff team. But if we're healthy at quarterback, that's the big if. Moving along, kind of a team that feels like Florida here, not personnel-wise, but in the same vein. Oklahoma, coming out of spring, it's hard to pinpoint glaring weaknesses with them. It's really weird when you come off a season like they had last year. You would think there's weakness everywhere. There's really not. Some small question marks, but they had 9 different offensive line combinations in their first 9 games last year, and that unit figures to be much more settled this year, but that's not at the forefront of the headlines. The forefront headline is, well, if we add Mateer at quarterback and Arbuckle at offensive coordinator, it got these wide receivers out of the portal as well. I mean, if we're quantum leaps better offensively, which I believe they will be, that's a top 20, easily top 20 defensive team. That's a playoff caliber team. Just like Florida, look at the schedule. That's why you won't hear more about Oklahoma. Ignorance about their additions, which will become an educated awareness of their roster as the season approaches. But then everyone will look at the schedule and say, there's no way. They may be right. But that right there, if you gave them Boston College's schedule, folks would be talking about Oklahoma a lot more. What about Auburn? Mystery team. You want to talk about mystery team? Auburn, huge mystery team. They added Jackson Arnold, turnover prone last year. Auburn, as a team, turnover prone last year. Well, if that's erased, or if it's just a minor problem, then you move past that and you realize, wow, they've got a lot of talent accumulated on this roster. Wow, that wide receiver room could be one of the best in the country. Well, then you look on the other side of the ball, which would be where my concern has been a little bit. That back 7 regressed last year. They were 118th in the country in passes of 50-plus yards allowed. So it's a mystery team for a reason. Really big question marks. But if they're answered positively, Auburn historically has the DNA of a program that's just always built to shock the world. Auburn being in the playoff conversation in November would shock the world. But if all that stuff falls into place for them, that's not out of the realm of possibility. They just need to show marked improvement. That's what they need to show. Tennessee was in the playoff last year. Tennessee did not do a ton in the portal, yet they were a constant headline during portal season because of Nico leaving. And then they bring Aguilar over from UCLA. But quarterback changed. There was a lot of question and still is on the offensive line, tailback, wide receiver, D-line. Like I've been saying, with Nico staying, there was going to be a lot of question about this team. He left, and that's kind of dominating the conversation, but beyond the quarterback position, there are questions on this team. But you know what could happen? And this I cannot know. If that locker room galvanizes around what just happened, you could have a program and a group of guys that make the best of a bad situation, and you have no clue how they're winning every week, but they just are, and they overcome all the questions, kind of like Notre Dame did early in the season last year. They kind of overcome all the questions, and they team their way. They grit their way to wins. That's how they've got to win this year. They're not going to outclass people with the roster as much as maybe even they could at times last year. And not to be left out of the conversation, it's just we have a standing agreement with Eli Drinkwitz that whenever we talk about his team, we need to bury it in the show because that's how he likes to live. Missouri, Bo Pribula is their quarterback. Added in from Penn State last year. New wide receivers. Are they going to mesh? They got a workable schedule, but are they going to mesh? The top 25 defense, and they are top 5 in defensive returning production. So although you're another year removed from losing your defensive coordinator and Kevin Peoples left as well, but you got a good unit there overall. And so, as usual, if we get good, like scrappy defensive play and we pair that with an emerging quarterback and some new additions at wide receiver, it's like the Missouri story every year. They'll be right back there again playing meaningful conference football in November. So those are just some snapshot type looks at teams coming out of the SEC. We'll do the other conferences coming up, Confri, plural of conference. It's time in the show. Let me pop the top on the Zevia. If you've wondered where cream soda has gone, it hasn't disappeared. I drank all the cream soda, so now we're going down the list, and vanilla cola is solid number 2 on the Zevia power rankings right now. Excuse me, power ratings. They are ratings, not rankings. But cream soda's not gone anywhere. It disappeared because I worked my way through all the cream soda. So now, a cheers to everyone. A nice 0 sugar cheers to everyone. Always hits well on the Thursday show. Let's be professional about what we're about to talk about. Hold on a second. I just had to block someone in the live chat. I do keep my eye on it. I don't want to talk about Bill Belichick's personal life on the show. I have no interest in it. I've watched this all week. I don't think I've spoken publicly about it. I may have tweeted about it in passing. I just don't care. But everybody else does. So here's what I care about. Football. North Carolina, going to be a good football team this year? Remains to be seen. But anyway, like I've said many, many times, it is not my show. It is your show. Here's the evidence. I put it to a vote today. I flat out told you, I don't want to talk about this. However, if you want it, I'll add it to tonight's show. 58.7% of you voted yes. In my opinion, we should require a supermajority yes to overrule my personal wishes. But that got shot down, not by management, but by my own staff. So, blindsided by treachery yet again, here I am talking about Bill Belichick and his 25-year-old girlfriend. I am, I think, as neutral as one could possibly be on North Carolina athletics. I didn't grow up rooting for North Carolina. I didn't grow up hating North Carolina. I grew up aware of where North Carolina was and that I loved their color scheme. I knew that much. Outside of that, have never cared one way or the other about North Carolina. So I have the most unbiased view imaginable on this. My whole takeaway has been, I may not have grown up caring one way or the other about North Carolina, but man, I always respected the brand of North Carolina athletics. And if I respect North Carolina's brand, I know good and well the folks who went there or who played there or who just root for that school really respect the brand. And so I've wondered from a distance how you must feel about watching all this play out publicly. North Carolina football is not some traditional blue blood powerhouse like Mount Rushmore of the sport type program. They're not that. But they've been solid at times, and they take pride in themselves. And overall, the institution and the brand of North Carolina athletics, you take pride in that. And to watch, what's dominated the headlines over the past few weeks, I look at it, I just think it's kind of sad for the brand of North Carolina. And if you don't feel that way, okay, you matter more than I do. I'm not the fan. I'm not the alum. You are. So if it doesn't bother you, then it doesn't bother me. I think it'd bother me a lot. And from a distance, I've been bothered by it. Now, there is a fact that we all know, and that is if Bill Belichick wins at North Carolina, nobody cares about this. North Carolina fans won't. North Carolina fans will rally around it the way any other fan base would. But at the same time, I will tell you, if you're a North Carolina fan and you think too much has been made of this, no, it hadn't. It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. It's embarrassing, and it's a huge deal. And you know good and well if it were happening at any other school. Can you imagine Duke football dealing with this right now? Do you honestly think you'd be sitting there going, oh, leave him alone. Let him just live his personal life. Let him be. Of course you wouldn't. Of course you wouldn't. You know how big a joke it is. Every one of us knows. Most people at North Carolina know. Most people in the profession know. But at the same time, if you win, all is forgiven. But I did want to push back on one thing because I saw a couple of comments as we were getting ready to talk about this saying, you just need to leave him alone, leave his personal life out of it. I would gladly leave his personal life out of it. In fact, most people would love to leave his personal life out of it. We were until it was impossible because it got thrust in your face on national TV. And then subsequently, there it is. There it is. We're not talking about this. Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are, Jay. We are talking about this on this show, unfortunately. So how in the world am I supposed to avoid this? It's on CBS. How am I supposed to avoid this? And then how am I supposed to avoid screenshots of emails that should be kept internal over there just being broadcast for the entire world to see? No. You can't ask for two things. You can't want to display your personal life publicly and then get pissed off when people acknowledge your personal life, especially when it rubs up in the very, very wrongest of ways against the university's brand. So it's very embarrassing. But if he wins, it'll be okay. But that's where I come in, because I don't really care about all the other stuff. Haven't cared, don't care. I care about whether he's going to win at North Carolina. And I just want to remind you what our opinion on that has been on this show from the beginning, and that is it is a very, very tall task for Belichick to win at North Carolina. This is not the NFL. College football is not a lighter version of the NFL. What wins at that level doesn't necessarily win at this level. The principles, the systems, the processes that worked at that level, in some cases don't work, and in some cases aren't even applicable at this level. So I'm not saying he's had an arrogance about how relatively simple it'll be, but a lot of people have had some arrogance about how simple it'll be. A guy won more than a fistful of Super Bowls. Of course he'll be able to win. I don't think that. I don't think that at all. In fact, I don't think it'll work out all that great for him at North Carolina. I've been wrong before, so we'll see about that. But my point is, without all the distraction, it was going to be hard for Belichick to win at North Carolina. With the distraction, does it make it more difficult? You'll never convince me that, don't care how old you are, someone's personal life being aired out like this isn't a distraction. It's 110% a distraction. If you're a human being breathing oxygen with a functioning brain, this is a distraction. Does it inversely affect their ability to do whatever they were going to do this fall? I didn't expect them to be that great this fall, but they've got a very workable schedule. I don't know much else about what North Carolina should be, but yeah, my thoughts are I wish it would disappear as a story. I hate that almost a supermajority of the audience wanted to talk about it, but I think it's embarrassing for the brand of North Carolina, more so than anything else. Bill Belichick's Bill Belichick. If he quit there today and moved on, he's Bill Belichick. North Carolina didn't ask for this, or you know what? Maybe portions of North Carolina asked for this. I'll tell you, if it doesn't work out, and I have no way of knowing whether it will or not, but in the world where it doesn't work out, and 2 years from now Belichick's not there anymore, you will start to hear stories about how convoluted and how big a mess the hiring process was, because you'll have a lot of people around North Carolina wanting to make sure the public knows it wasn't my call to hire him. I didn't want him. And there are some people around that program that can justifiably say that. And there are other people around that program who know they're the reason he's there. Not my story to tell. But then again, this isn't a story I even want to be talking about. Here we are. Quick Trip, as of now, still allowing everyone into their stores, no matter what your opinion is on Bill Belichick and his romantic interests. But I will tell you this. That cold brew on tap hits no matter what. And that cold brew on tap is non-discriminatory, and it doesn't matter what state you're from, and it doesn't matter who you're dating. You go in there and you chug some of that, and I'm not even just going to say you feel better. I'm going to say you're a better person. My words, not theirs. For legal reasons, they cannot promise that. And I'm not promising anything, but I'm just saying I strongly believe that to be the case. Now, I told you the other day, we're going to need to do a little solid for Quick Trip, but I forgot the paperwork downstairs, so we're going to do it on the Sunday show. But there is a very, very, very important, do we want to call this an election? It's a vote. There's a very important vote going on right now. We got to keep it quiet. We want to keep it kind of low-key, even though I'm saying it live on air. But we got to push Quick Trip over a finish line. I'm going to go as far as to say this is one of our most important duties of 2025 as a Pate State collective. That's what our collective does. Your collective's out there paying $40 million to football players. Our collective is making sure Quick Trip gets voted gas station of the year in these United States of America. Again, more details to come Sunday. Let's move on. What else do we have? I got all kind of papers in front of me. Oh, yeah, this question. Yeah, good question here. We did this the other day with USC, and it did good numbers. And wouldn't you know it, people like behind-the-scenes stories. I never would have guessed. Whomst amongst us would have guessed it, but you do. So pause for a chug of water. Someone in the live chat the other day said, why do you need to tell us you're going to take a sip of water? Just take it. Well, for you on YouTube, I don't have to tell you. You can see it. But a lot of people listen to this show on podcast. So when my voice disappears for 4 seconds, they think something's wrong with their phone. Nope. Just taking a sip of non-branded water there because the company hasn't paid for advertisement on the show. So anyway, Eric from Birmingham, Alabama said, I saw you went to Alabama this week. Any good stories about the Tide that you could share? Yes. So a couple of things struck me. I spent the day there yesterday. Yeah, so Wednesday. So I spent the day down there yesterday. They are very blessed at the linebacker position. This time last year, in fact, this time 6 months ago, they thought linebacker could be a real big weakness on that team. And because of an unfortunate circumstance, Deontay Lawson getting hurt, it's led to him coming back this year. And then because of how jacked up the rules are right now in terms of eligibility, Justin Jefferson has been able to come back this year. So you're talking about a position unit that went from what they thought would be a weakness to a strength of that team, and that's not overlooked in that building. I would also say there is a pretty supreme confidence at Alabama that they just killed it in this recruiting class. And I think you'll see a lot of those true freshmen from that class on the field in very, very meaningful spots for them this fall. So that's from a roster standpoint what I noticed. You know what? Also, because I saw in the live chat, someone was asking about a sleeper player for them. Keon Keeley is one I'd circle. Keon Keeley's a former 5-star kid, really highly rated. And you have this tendency in this world to look at a 5-star kid, and if he doesn't come in and pop on the scene immediately, you kind of forget about him. Keon Keeley didn't pop on the scene his first couple of seasons, so people have really forgotten about him. This time last year, I didn't know if he'd still be there. So what happened was what we talked with Rich Rodriguez about the other day. If you haven't gone and listened to our conversation with Rich Rodriguez, West Virginia head coach, formerly in the running for the Alabama job, but he has since returned to West Virginia. But he talked about how his entire philosophy on coaching and developing players changed because he used to believe, in his words, if he won't bite as a puppy, he won't bite as a dog. So he told a story about how there was a kid who they thought had it in him, but he was just soft. And he was a wide receiver, but he was soft and he didn't want anything to do with blocking. And all of a sudden, over the span of like 3 or 4 days one week, after they pushed him and pushed him and pushed him, somehow he just snapped and became the most devastating stalk blocker on that team, became a physical presence at the position, became a team leader, and he said, that forever changed how I viewed players. I will not write them off anymore. It's up to us to, if we recruited them and we evaluated them, we need to bring it out of them. Unless we're just dead wrong about the kid, we got to find a way to bring it out of him. That, I think, has kind of happened with Keon Keeley around there. Doesn't mean he's going to be an All-American, but that kid really, really wants to be at Alabama. And I'd just be interested to see, because I think he'll get a shot this fall. I think he'll play some for him this fall. But in the overarching compartment, from what you can talk about at least, it's funny to look at the makeup of their staff, I guess, is what stands out a lot. So Kalen DeBoer is the head coach there. You'll actually hear this in the conversation we post with him on the channel on Friday. But it's always important to know what your weaknesses are as a coach, as a leader, and then make sure you supplement in the hires that you make around you, which just means if you're not the kind of person that goes at someone's throat, you better make sure you got 3 or 4 on your staff who will. They've got 5 or 6 on their staff who will. And it really complements Kalen DeBoer's style. He's not a church mouse, but he also doesn't carry himself like Nick Saban did. So it's okay because he's got some field generals on his coaching staff. They're actually really, really good on that coaching staff. So that's what I notice. I noticed there is a surprising amount still around there of holdovers from the Nick Saban era. That's atypical. Most times when a coach takes over a major program, there's a total flush done. I don't just mean coaching staff. I mean recruiting, player personnel, right up to the folks who mind the front desk and sports and information people. And sometimes there's a complete wash. And I mean, they were wise enough when they came in to say, all right, the best of all time who was just here thought that these people were good enough. So we're not just going to wipe the slate clean here. And they've been really strategic about who they've kept around there. And it kind of makes sense when you get to know who those people are that they kept around. So yesterday, we did our sit down with DeBoer at 9 a.m. And boy, he had a nice appointment afterwards. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell that. He can tell that story if he wants to. There are perks of being a head coach in the SEC, man. That's all I'll say. Big perks. You think that the comparing of salaries would be how you measure up how coaches compare to one another? Nope. Access to certain things. That's how SEC coaches measure themselves against each other. But anyway, I stuck around. So he had to get out of there. I stuck around. I went and worked out down in Bama's weight room. And the funny thing is the president was going to be on campus. I think they had graduation today. So the president was due to come in because he spoke at Bama's graduation, not of the university, president of the United States. So Secret Service was there doing their usual lock everything down, put up all the barricades and barriers, which is a normal scene there. It's not even like the first time recently that I've been around there that Secret Service has been there. You kind of get to know the guys. Hey, Jeff, it's you again. Well, the counter assault division, I believe it was in the weight room when I was down there. I've never had a safer workout in my life. It was great. It was just phenomenal. Great chest day, and never had to look over my shoulder once. So that was just, you're looking around, and you got a couple of baseball players back there, and there's Secret Service too. Great workout at Alabama. I just think in general, if you told yourself 5 years ago, after the 2023 season, Saban's going to retire, what do you think it'll look like a year later? I would have thought there's no way they're ever going to smoothly transition away from him. The price you pay to have had Nick Saban as your head coach is it's going to be really rocky and tumultuous when he leaves. And there's a huge power struggle, I would think, and everyone wants a say in who the next head coach is going to be. Some of the same mess they had in their lap before he got there, maybe it reemerges. So you never would have known who Kalen DeBoer was at that time is the point. But if you could flash forward 5 years and see a year after Saban's gone that this is the status of the program, you would have signed up for that in a heartbeat. You would have been thrilled. So that's kind of how it feels around there right now. I think there'll be a factor in the SEC race this year. I was looking at an article on a certain website today, and it said Georgia and Texas and everyone else in the SEC, that's one way to look at the league. That's not necessarily how I see it, but that's one way to look at the league. If you also feel that way, might I suggest heading over to FanDuel right quick, because there are odds for these sorts of things. If you look at Missouri and you honestly think they could win the SEC, you could go bet it, or Alabama, or Auburn, or South Carolina. You can go bet it. I do not necessarily think there's any clear-cut favorite in the SEC this upcoming year. I don't know that there's one in the Big Ten. I don't know of any. Where are the clear-cut favorites? Clemson is a clear-cut favorite in the ACC, and I think they should be. And as we know, to lead the show tonight, we proved that they're going to win the national championship, but maybe you don't believe in the science that we used. Maybe you think it's pseudo-science. We all know how dangerous that can be on college football shows. Well, go bet it, or go bet against it, I guess. Anti-college football science prop bets soon to come, maybe on FanDuel. But they are the exclusive odds provider of the show. We appreciate them immensely. I wanted to close the show tonight with something thematically that we start to touch on this time of year. It's May. So first you have May, Then I think you have June and July. So if you really think about it, not counting this month, because we're already in it, so you don't count the month you're in, there are 2 months until fall camps are opening. That's 60 days. I mean, it's hard to get a passport that quick. So what I'm trying to say is the season is essentially here. And therefore, we have to start talking about these sorts of things. Vince from Charlotte, North Carolina, he said, I've been catching up on some shows. I've heard you drop the hot start candidate line a few times for certain teams. Can you give me some examples of this? So Vince is asking which teams could really start fast this year. USC is one of them, Vince. USC will be, I think, solidly favored in their first 4 games. And here's what you need to think about. It's not about circling every team that you think is going to win their first few games. To me, take the teams that aren't going to be expected to contend. And I don't think many people are going to expect USC to contend. Which ones out of those groups of teams can start off hot? 4-0, 5-0? Well, I think USC can. They're going to win their first 2 games, and then they're on the road in the Big Ten, but it's Purdue, brand new head coach there in Barry Odom. They should win that game. Michigan State at home. They should win that game. It won't be until at Illinois, and I believe that is week 5. It's their 5th game, where the country may watch them. And then you'll really get your first look at them nationally. Week 7, it's their 6th game when Michigan comes to town. But my point is, honestly, they could be 5-0 when they play Michigan. And they play Michigan at home. They could be 6-0 when they go to Notre Dame. They could be 5-1 even when they go to Notre Dame. And that'd still be a huge game. So I think USC is a fast start candidate. I would also say Louisville is very much a hot start candidate. There's a solid path here to 5-0. Eastern Kentucky, James Madison, Bowling Green, at Pitt, Virginia. They ought to be 5-0. I trust Jeff Braun with any quarterback. I trust him with me at quarterback. So I especially trust him to get enough out of Miller Moss, who transferred in there, to win. Now notice, we're talking about hot starts, because eventually they got Miami, they got Clemson, they got SMU, but notice that Miami game. 2 things are funny about that. First off, it is their 6th game, but it's in week 8. Both teams will have already had 2 bye weeks by then. I don't know what the ACC did in schedule making this year, but it's really wild to look at how discombobulated the thing looks. The second thing you need to know about that Louisville-Miami game is it's a Friday night game. Miami hosted Virginia Tech on a Friday night last year, and it was the most chaotic, loosely like resembling a football game display that we saw last year maybe. So Louisville-Miami could be good, and Louisville could be undefeated when they play Miami. Ole Miss, kind of mentioned this earlier, I think Ole Miss, out of all the SEC teams, is the most solid hot start candidate. Now, there may be a lot of unknown. Defense, a lot of unknown. Quarterback, brand new starting quarterback, but unlike some of these other teams, they got Georgia State and then at Kentucky and Arkansas and Tulane, their first 4. Those aren't terrible teams per se, but they're 4 teams that Ole Miss should handle. They should beat all 4 of them. And then it gets a little more dicey. But Georgia has Tennessee and Bama in their first 4 games. Florida's got Miami and LSU. Bama plays FSU and Wisconsin. Texas got Ohio State week 1. A&M plays Notre Dame early. Ole Miss doesn't have a game of that caliber. So they're a hot start candidate. And in the Big 12, I think Brigham Young is a hot start candidate because we think in our internal grading system, Brigham Young may have the easiest schedule out of all the Power 4 teams this year, which their fans continue to take as an insult for some reason. I have no idea why. It's just one grading metric we use. And don't you want to play a workable schedule, by the way? So they start with an FCS team in Portland State. They play a terrible ACC team in Stanford. And then they got a G5 team at East Carolina. And then they play a couple of teams, Colorado and West Virginia, that are bottom half of the Big 12 in the odds market. It's very workable. By the way, when I tell you you've got the easiest schedule, I don't mean you have a ton of easy games. At Iowa State's not easy. Playing Utah, not easy. At Texas Tech, not easy. Relatively speaking, there aren't many teams at all that you would trade schedules with. That's all I'm saying. So give me USC, Louisville, Ole Miss, Brigham Young. Those are my hot start candidates. What else? I don't think anything else. Nice week. A lot of traveling. I'm going to go sleep for about 14 hours tonight. Appreciate you guys. We'll be back Sunday night, Same time as always for Direct Colin, producer Jesse. I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great start to your weekend, and God bless.